Hey everybody, so I'm here to talk about the $2 billion fine that Goldman is going to probably pay next month to the US government, and they're going to admit to wrongdoing because they did wrongdoing. And anytime a company or a bank or whatever is going to end up paying a $2 billion fine, they probably did something wrong and knew about it. So it has to do with a stealing of funds from a fund in Malaysia. So I'm going to talk about that Malaysia fund now to explain this. It's called the One Malaysia Development Berhad, which abbreviated stands for, it's called the One MDB Fund. So just always refer to as the One MDB Fund, this Malaysian fund. Now what this is, it's a Malaysian strategic development company wholly owned under the Minister of Finance in Malaysia. And it was formed to help drive long-term economic development for Malaysia. It was to focus on strategic development projects in the areas of energy, real estate, tourism, and agribusiness. The fund was originally called the Terengganu Investment Authority and was formed in 2008. Its purpose was to ensure long-term sustainable development while safeguarding the economic well-being of Terengganu residents. And Terengganu is a small state in kind of northwestern Malaysia. Now on May 27, 2009, two gentlemen by the name of Ismail and Sharo Azrul Ibrahim signed a deal which was set up by the AMI Investment Bank, which is one of Malaysia's biggest banks, and this deal was set up to raise 5 billion Malaysia ringgits, or the equivalent at the time 1.47 billion US dollars. Since then, the Malaysia ringgit has gotten weaker against the dollar. They were going to raise this money through the issuance of Islamic medium-term notes, and they did this even though the Terengganu government told them not to. And the advisor in this deal was a gentleman by the name of Jho Low. Now Jho Low was born into a very wealthy Malaysia/Chinese family. So he has family in both China and Malaysia, and they have a very wealthy background. So remember the name Jho Low because he's at the heart of this scandal. Now on July 31st, 2009, the Minister of Finance Incorporated, now when I say that, those words, Minister of Finance Incorporated, I'm referring to a government organization, not the actual Minister of Finance person. So the Finance Incorporated took over the fund and changed the name to One Malaysia Development Fund, the One MDB fund that I mentioned earlier. Now the minister, like I say, the Minister of Finance Incorporated, like I was mentioning, is a body that was established under the Minister of Finance Incorporation Act of 1957. This act provides the authority for the Minister of Finance Incorporated to enter into controlled acquisitions, purchases, possessions, holdings, and maintains tangible and intangible assets. Now, the Minister of Finance Incorporated took over this fund and changed the name to the One MDB 4 months after then Prime Minister Najib Razak became Prime Minister. So Najib Razak became Prime Minister, and then 4 months later he had the Minister of Finance Incorporated take over this fund and change the name. he's one of the biggest thieves with this fund. He said this change in the fund was made to expand it into a federal entity so the benefits could reach a broader spectrum of Malaysians instead of the residents of just one state. Now, on March 10th, 2015, the Auditor General started an audit on the fund to see if the money was being spent like it was supposed to be spent. On March 4th, 2016, the audit report was deemed classified under the Open Secrets Act of 1972. So again, the Auditor General of Malaysia audited the fund, but the report was deemed classified. And that's the way the Prime Minister wanted it for obvious reasons, because he was stealing. Now, to repay its debts, okay, let's see. Got a little ahead of myself. Okay, so on May 15th, 2018, the new Prime Minister, Mahathir Mohamad, who happens to have served a previous term, but he ran again after this scandal, and so again, the Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad took office on May 10th, 2018, and then 5 days later on May 15th, he declassified the audit report. So again, the new Prime Minister, 5 days after taking office, declassified the audit report. The new Minister of Finance, Lim Guan Eng, appointed PricewaterhouseCoopers to perform a new audit and found that the company was insolvent and unable to repay its debts. And the debts were over 11 billion. And on June 28th, 2018, the CEO of this fund, Arul Kanda, was fired. Now, allegations were made in 2015 that the 1MDB fund was used to steal state funds and transfer into Najib Razak's accounts. Again, Najib Razak was the Prime Minister at the time, and there were allegations that this fund was being used by he and some co-conspirators to transfer state funds into their personal accounts. And also the accounts of Jho Low, who I mentioned earlier. Now, the FBI started investigating in 2016 the connection between an ex-Goldman Sachs banker named Tim Leissner and Prime Minister Najib Razak. The FBI was probing Leissner's multi-billion-dollar deals with the 1MDB fund. They found that $700 million was transferred into the Prime Minister Najib Razak's accounts. Of course, one of the Prime Minister's excuses was, oh, these were gifts from donors. And another excuse was, oh, Saudi Arabia gave me a big thank you gift for fighting Islamic extremism. Yeah, and that's insane. And it's all false. Now, Goldman led a Malaysia state guarantee bond issue, which Goldman was allegedly paid $300 million in fees. This raised over $3 billion for the fund. Again, this was a bond issue that overseen by Goldman. Now, in all, $4.5 billion was stolen by Jho Low. That's the rich guy from, who has family in Malaysia and China, and Najib Razak and others, including officials from Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, primarily in Abu Dhabi. So officials from all these places I just mentioned were part of the theft ring, stealing a total of $4.5 billion. Now, Prime Minister Najib Razak was arrested on July 3rd, 2018, and then the police raided residences owned by him. They seized stockpiles of cash, and then separately they seized 1,400 necklaces, 567 handbags, 423 watches, 2,200 rings, 1,600 brooches, and 14 tiaras worth $273 million. Now again, the former Prime Minister Najib Razak, the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, he bought $273 million worth of jewelry and handbags and watches with stolen funds that were meant to help the people of his country. Now, after only 6 years in existence, the 1MDB fund had debts of over $11 billion, which prompted a negative economic outlook for the country. So now he's affecting the economic outlook of his own country because of his own greed. The producers of the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and directed by Martin Scorsese, was financed with $100 million from Jho Low. Again, Jho Low, that guy at the center of this theft ring, wrote a check for $100 million to finance the Wolf of Wall Street movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio. So that movie was made with stolen funds meant to help the people of Malaysia. And again, I want to comment on the Prime Minister Razak's purchase of $273 million of jewelry and other junk. I mean, I can't think of a worse way to invest money. If you're going to steal that much money, invest it at least. Buy some real estate, or at least just buy shares in a big blue chip company like Coca-Cola or something. I mean, this shows how stupid he is, not only to spend the money so foolishly like that, but to think he's going to get away with stealing $700 million and no one's going to see. Now, back to Jho Low. He's the one that financed the Wolf of Wall Street movie with the stolen $100 million. He also likes to do things like hang out with celebrities and made him feel special. He bought Kim Kardashian a $325,000 Ferrari, but she of course had to give that back. He bought Picasso and Basquiat paintings for Leonardo DiCaprio, and of course DiCaprio gave those back. Well, when I say gave them back, they gave them to the FBI. Now, the son or the stepson of the former Prime Minister Najib Razak, he is the co-founder of Red Granite Productions Company, which is the company that Jho Low gave the stolen $100 million to make the Wolf of Wall Street movie, and they also made the Dumb and Dumber 2 movie with Jim Carrey. And then there was a third movie, I can't remember the name of it, but those movies were financed with stolen money. Jho Low dated, I guess she's an actress, Miranda Kerr, and he gave her over $8 million worth of jewelry, which she had to fork over to the FBI. Now, on November 1, 2018, Jho Low and the two ex-Goldman bankers were indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice. On October 31st, 2019, I read that Jho Low settled with the U.S. government without an admission of guilt, but I don't know how much that covers, because I can't imagine he can just walk free. He committed such huge crimes. I think they're going to keep hunting him, but he's been roaming free in China, and so far no one's been able to touch him. Now, the two Goldman bankers, one is a gentleman by the name of Roger Ong, who earlier this year was extradited from Malaysia to face charges here, with the agreement with Malaysia that the U.S. would extradite him back to Malaysia to face trial there. I couldn't find out what's happened to him here. It doesn't look like it's been his situation's been completed here. But either way, he's probably never going to get out of jail because he's got charges here and in Malaysia. Now, his boss is the former chairman for Southeast Asia for Goldman Sachs. His name is Tim Leissner. Now, he pleaded guilty to conspiring to launder stolen 1 MDB fund cash to pay bribes and kickbacks so Goldman Sachs could market more than $6.5 billion worth of bonds to the fund. Goldman made $600 million with the bond sales, and Leissner made $43.7 million in bonuses that he has since had to forfeit. And allegedly, Leissner and Ung, the two former Goldman Sachs bankers, allegedly transferred $200 million to their private accounts. I don't know if that's been resolved either. Now, when Leissner, the former Goldman banker, pleaded guilty in court, he said he conspired with many other employees and agents of Goldman Sachs, which is very much in line of its culture at Goldman Sachs, to conceal facts from certain compliance and legal employees in Goldman Sachs. So he's basically saying it's culture at Goldman Sachs to lie, cheat, and steal. And then he said, I and several other employees of Goldman Sachs at the time concealed that we knew that Jho Low was promising and paying bribes and kickbacks to foreign officials to obtain and retain 1 MDB business for Goldman Sachs. Now, Malaysia is expected to file criminal charges next year against Goldman Sachs to recoup $7.5 billion in reparations. The bank is currently offering less than $2 billion, and the current Prime Minister said that's unacceptable. Now, I would say your company is guilty of wrongdoing when you're already settled to pay the U.S. government up to $2 billion, and you're offering Malaysia $2 billion, but they want $7.5 billion. So, on the former CEO, I can't think of his name right now, Lloyd Blankfein, said that these two Goldman Sachs bankers were rogue employees acting on their own. Yeah, they did wrong and they were concealing stuff, but I'm sorry, when there's $600 million worth of fees to the bank, you're going to go everything with a fine-tooth comb, and I don't believe that these higher-ups didn't know something was a little shady. After all, Lloyd Blankfein attended 2 meetings with Jho Low. Now, there are 17 current and former Goldman Sachs directors who are facing trial in Malaysia for their role in the bond issues. I don't want to say they're all guilty. I mean, they're directors. I can't imagine they were all guilty of knowing something was going on. Who knows? But obviously, there's a lot of higher-ups way up high in Goldman Sachs that are complete crooks. So anyways, Goldman Sachs is in talks with the U.S. government and a state regulator to square this away, and next month they're probably going to pay about $2 billion in fines. But like I say, Malaysia's going to go after them too, and they want $7.5 billion back that they got ripped off. So that's the bottom line, and this kind of reminds me of Goldman Sachs when they were bundling subprime mortgages that had a high default rate. They were bundling them and selling them as investments to their own clients, while at the same time they were betting against these. So if they would fail, they would make money. So they were betting against the investments they were selling their own clients. That was during, leading up to the financial crisis. So that shows you the kind of ethics there are at Goldman Sachs. But anyways, that's it for now. Anyways, take care.